Good afternoon. Wow, well, after that, I think I could also do with using that app today. I can tell you that anything you may catch yourself listening sometimes to artists on repeat. I don't know if any of you have that. I certainly do. It takes 30 days to break a habit, but if you don't have that time, then you need to listen to the next panel. Discussing new ways to discover your next playlist in places you may never expect is CEO of Resident Advisor Nick Sabine, DJ and producer B.Traits, and Cherie from Billboard. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Great. Thank you both for being here, and thank you all for joining us. I'm very excited to engage in a debate. I hope it will be a debate about the future of music discovery. So I'm going to dive right into questions. And I recently read this magazine article from a magazine called Real Life, claiming that as the rise of algorithmic discovery, as that becomes more popular with things like Spotify's Discover Weekly, Release Radar, all these algorithmic channels are coming up, they're essentially taking on the traditional role of record reviewers, of DJs, human curators, and making them obsolete, especially because if you think about like Spotify's Discover Weekly, they have a much higher hit rate, I would guess on average, in terms of individually, in a personalized manner, recommending the right music to the right person at the right time. So I just wanted to open that up, see if you two seem to be in roles where the human is very heavily involved. So do you feel like your role has changed because of streaming? Do you feel threatened by it, challenged by it? If you could dive into that.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very poignant question for the time. And I think whilst it's easy to look at it as a threat, I also see it as a huge opportunity for a curation channel or a publisher or a media outlet like Resident Advisor. Because at the end of the day, I think it fundamentally comes down to trust. And the audience that is discovering the music will lean towards the things that they trust the most. So whether if it's trusting in a machine to guide you successfully, as Discover Weekly has a habit of doing, or a platform curation panel, whether it's an artist or whether it's something like Resident Advisor. And we've got, in our case, 17 years of building trust with an audience, critiquing this art form from an independent point of view, and helping people discover great music. And as a result, I think there's a legacy of trust there that has been built up over a long period of time, which I think is meaningful for people. And alongside that, I think it's also a great opportunity for us to utilize streaming platforms to speak to a much broader and much larger audience than we ever could. And traditionally, the model for a web digital publisher would be to produce content in the hope of as many people as possible coming to your website and spending as long as possible there based on the quality of the content. And one of the beauties of the streaming industry and the aspect that you can now listen to music at any stage, whether you're on the bus, whether you wake up in the morning, whatever. There's more people listening to more music than ever before. And I think that's an amazing opportunity for us, because it means we can use a channel like Spotify, which I now consider, our playlisting curated channel on Spotify to be as important as our homepage, for example, because we can now speak to a much broader audience. And interestingly, now in the streaming age, someone can have a very meaningful relationship with Resident Advisor as a curator and solely exist on Spotify. So they may, in a given year, never come to our website, but they spend their entire relationship with us as a brand and as a curation channel exists on their preferred streaming platform. Now, they may still have a great sense of the diversity of music that we cover, the diversity of artists that we speak about, and they may have a great understanding of us as a company and as a brand, but never visit the website. And because of that, I think it's a really unique opportunity for us to speak to, potentially 100 or 200 times the number of people that we might be able to if we were running a traditional model of encouraging people to come to our site to discover music and then return to the streaming platform. So I actually think it's creating a huge opportunity for influential and independent curation channels like Resident Advisor.
Cool.
I completely agree with Nick. I think having that balance of human curation, the listener trusting in the individual's taste in their playlist. For me, as a radio presenter, I very carefully put together my 3 hours of music for Radio 1. And it's more of a journey. Like every track mixes together carefully. I'm thinking about hour 1 into hour 2 and how I'm going to get there. I'm not sure that algorithms are really sort of smashing that human element of the delivery of the presentation yet.
Yeah, so thinking about the question of using division of labor, for lack of a better phrase, between algorithms and humans in this world of discovery. So you're sort of touching into how humans can provide that sort of context, long-form storytelling through music a lot more effectively right now than algorithms can. There's an element of trust, Nick, that you mentioned. Is there anything else that comes to mind in terms of what humans can do better than algorithms, or the other way around? Like, where do you think algorithms, where do you think AI can actually do better and complement the work that you and other human curators are doing?
I think it is incredible, like a streaming service where you have the suggested artists or tracks that sound like one another, so that you might stumble upon a brand new artist. But there also is this incredible element of feeling really proud that you've discovered something on your own on the internet by, like, I don't know, going through SoundCloud or going through Bandcamp. You feel like ownership over that discovery. And for me, when I hit the suggestions tab on Spotify, I kind of feel like something's just thrown that in my face because of an algorithm, and I kind of internally know that. I'm not ready to trust it yet. And I love the self-discovery. Like, I'm a massive fan of finding something on my own, and that's how I became a DJ, was like digging in record stores. There's nothing like that. It's like having ownership and being so proud that you discover that artist. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And Nick, anything?
Yeah, I think context is an important thing. A journalist can contextualize a piece of music in a way that an algorithm can't, by virtue of the journalist's understanding of the genre of music, of the history of the artist in the live space, in terms of the context of how different this album might have been creatively from a previous work. And that's something that fundamentally an algorithm or machine learning will never be able to replicate. And I think that still has a lot of value to people. And I also think we're at a really interesting time where it's, at the end of the day, like, convenience is a huge tool in terms of powering people's decision making, even from a discovery point of view. And at the moment, one of the most convenient ways to discover music is just on some of these basically automated selection panels on a platform like Spotify or Apple Music. But I still think there's a huge audience of people, and those people are often the influencers within their peer group when it comes to shaping a small group of people's musical identity and tastes, that are more proactive rather than reactive in their search for new music. And I think those people will stretch beyond some of those channels that you were just talking about, and actually actively, proactively discover music. And I think the future is that combination of AI, machine learning, and curation, whether that's from an artist point of view or also from a platform like Resident Advisor, which has a suite of journalists that are experts within their particular field.
Yeah, so jumping off of that point, thinking of Resident Advisor as an example, and thinking about the journey of discovery for a typical music fan, right? Like, say I use Discover Weekly every single week, so I'll discover an artist that really piques my interest on Discover Weekly, which is delivered to me algorithmically, and then maybe I'll look later to what journalists have written or critics have written about a song or about an artist to get a deeper understanding of them emotionally. And there are many other people like myself who sort of operate on that in that order, and I was wondering if that's been your experience, and where you see yourself sitting in that journey of discovery. Are you seeing yourself coming later and later, or are you still in a role of influence, of dictating people's tastes and influencing what they listen to, or is it more speaking to the people who have discovered them through other channels like Spotify on Resident Advisor's playlist, things like that?
I think it's very much down to the individual, and in terms of how active that person is in their bid to discover new music. So those people who have always, made music discovery an intrinsic part of their life, I think will still be really early on in the process. what's exciting for me is the volume of people whose tastes we can hopefully influence at the end of that process, who may, for example, literally just pop something on and look at Discover Weekly and have that kind of shape their musical tastes at that given moment. And I think the volume of people who are doing that is deeply significant. And so I think as technology evolves and as people's consumption of music habits evolve so significantly, it's our responsibility as a curator to evolve in the same way. And I believe that every art form needs a successful media, or ideally multiple successful media to critique the art form, to contextualize the art form, to look after not only the here and now, but to provide context from a legacy point of view, to help new people coming to this art form understand how we got to this point. Like, they're all things that can't be done by an algorithm. But equally, there's still a lot of people whose sole relationship with music discovery might be through a singular platform. But I think that's, as I said in the beginning, I think that's a massive opportunity for us to work in partnership with those platforms to provide meaningful curation that potentially pushes people out of their quite kind of linear focused in terms of what they like. You can know what someone likes, but we kind of want to help people broaden their tastes and do that by contextualizing a piece of music with some of the other things that they might currently enjoy.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add?
It's exactly the same thing for me as a presenter, as a radio presenter. Like, my listeners are buying into my personal taste, and I think that's something that, I know I'm repeating myself, that is something that I think the algorithms just haven't quite cracked yet.
Yeah, but I think on the upside, just from a sheer number crunching point of view, algorithms are amazing in terms of just from an ease. I mean, you've got, in electronic music alone, you've got 25,000 records being released a week. Right now, it's
it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming, and you just don't have enough people to sift through all of that and help the good stuff rise to the top. So there is significant advantage in having algorithms that can help sift through the volume. But then, even at the top, you still need to be able to, from a personalization point of view, be able to successfully help people, like, just broaden their taste, essentially.
Yeah, and so on that point, now thinking from an artist's
Sound
perspective,
effects.
yes,
some drama.
Yes, and so thinking from an artist's perspective now, so we're speaking at the Web Summit, and from a startup's point of view, there's a lot of talk about like SEO optimization, how to optimize getting in front of the right people at the right time, right? Optimize your visibility on social media, on search, et cetera. And I'm seeing the same exact dynamic with artists. You have things like the type beat ecosystem on YouTube, where artists are just trying to make music that sounds exactly like Future, exactly like Drake, and exactly like these huge mainstream rappers to try to break past the noise. I've met a lot of artists who are, the first thing they think about when they're writing a song is, how do I get onto New Music Friday on Spotify? How do I get on this playlist so I can maximize my streams? And so the impact of algorithms, I feel like, is these artists are thinking more and more about optimization. Like, how can I optimize my chances of getting picked up by this algorithm? And some people have argued that aesthetically, creatively, it's led to like a flattening almost of creativity, or further homogenization. Like, music is sounding increasingly similar. There have been studies showing in like the Billboard Top 100 charts, the music just sonically is sounding more and more similar than it was in the 80s or 90s. You had much bigger variety of genres. I don't know if you've encountered that trend in your own careers as you're discovering music, or if you, or how you think people might be able to combat that, or whether you think it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, sure. I think, playlisting is essentially the new radio. So it's, back in the 80s and 90s, record companies and artists would essentially do whatever they could to be featured on radio. And now you're seeing the same replication of that in terms of artists, labels, and so on, doing whatever they can to be featured in certain influential playlists. And so that, this effect that you're talking about isn't surprising. But I think the obligation on the streaming platforms part is, because some of these playlists have such significant influence on certain genres of music, but they may actually be, on the streaming side, like one person's taste. And I think that's why the streaming platforms have an obligation, I think, to actually go out to market and work with different journalists or different blogs or different platforms that are experts in particular fields, and to help them actually accumulate a really interesting selection of music that replicates exactly where that genre is at that point in time. That's a reflection of how that particular music is evolving over time. Whereas at the moment, if it's entirely down to an algorithm or it's entirely down to one individual, that individual can only be aware of so much across, take electronic music, for example. There may be one person curating all of the electronic music playlists at a platform like Spotify. Now, that person's field of view can only be so wide. And I think there's a great opportunity for the streaming platforms to cast a wider net and work with experts in their field to create a more meaningful music discovery experience on now the biggest streaming platforms in the world.
Exactly. For me, as an artist, I think that using things like the tagging of moods, for example, that has become really valuable for me in this new project that I've just launched called Passophonic, which is sort of bridging the gap between ambient and minimalist music with sound healing and meditation. And for me, I need to use those tags like mood and just kind of break into a totally different genre. But in terms of making things that sound exactly the same, I mean, we've all kind of heard the formula of making a specific kind of track. For me personally, I just don't think that really works. When you're an artist, especially if you're trying to break through, if you are trying to make a track that sounds exactly like someone else's track, it's usually pretty transparent. And that can just be a struggle in itself to just be chasing this dream. I mean, you might make it big for a certain amount of time, but maintaining that you're just going to have to constantly be changing because of the pace that music changes all the time. What's popular changes all the time. You're just going to be chasing the next fad. So I don't know. I mean, I would just, my word of advice would be just to know, I don't recommend carbon copying or using formulas to create new music.
Yeah. Right,
but I think I think a curation platform can learn a lot from how algorithms work in terms of, there's now a huge portion of people discovering music of a certain age who have only discovered it in a certain way, and that may literally be just from listening to it rather than reading about it and then listening to it. So the responsibility is on us to evolve our approach in a way that's meaningful for them and is in keeping with how they're used to discovering music. It's not saying that one is better or another, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we're catering for people who like to discover music just by playing it and listening to it on a 30-second clip to decide if it's something that they like, or someone who likes to read 4 paragraphs about a single review. And those are the different styles or different types of people will have different styles for discovering music. And it's important as a curator and as a publisher to make sure that we're evolving our discovery of music in ways that are in keeping with how people are actually doing it themselves based on technology.
Being where the listeners are, right? Like being where the customers are, how they behave. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think this will be my last question. And since we're at the Web Summit, I'm sure there are a lot of people at this conference and at other tech conferences who are trying to build apps to improve the current music discovery experience. Because I think there is this increasing consensus that the way music discovery works, the dominant ways are very limited, right? They're only good at a certain type of thing, and they're trying to build improvements on the incumbent platforms that are already available. But in my years of writing about music and tech, which has been around 3 years, I've yet to see really an independent music discovery app really get off the ground effectively. It's really hard to build an effective business model around that. And I was wondering if either of you had any thoughts on why that might be the case, or what you think makes a most effective music discovery experience. I guess there are different models, as you were just going to. There's no one box that everyone fits into. But if someone were building a music discovery app, one, do you think that's a viable model in the first place? And then two, how do you think it could best be built? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, it's all about your, like launching any product in any market, it's about your unique value proposition. And really, like, if you're building a music discovery app, like, it needs to be infinitely better than what already exists on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, if you're competing on a purely technological level. Now, that's Spotify's fundamental core business. They've got a huge team of people who are devoting all of their brain power, resources, money, everything to creating the richest music discovery experience possible from a technological point of view, so you never have to leave the platform. So it's very difficult to really imagine where the opportunity is for you to come and add another layer in there when we live in an era now where convenience is almost more important than price in terms of people's consideration and how they use technology. So I can imagine why there's a lot that haven't been successful in that regard, because it's very difficult to offer something that isn't already, from a purely technological point of view, offer something that isn't already being offered by some of the major streaming platforms, because it's in their interest to obviously have the most meaningful discovery tools, which is where I think the humanistic element comes in, because that's something that can't be programmed, that relies on incredible journalists or incredible curators that have years, sometimes decades worth of understanding of appreciation of music, that can help spotlight interesting stuff that an algorithm might not pick up because it's not popular or whatever. Like, our role in music discovery is to support local scenes. Now, an algorithm, is really kind of motivated by creating as many plays as possible and creating as much reach for a playlist. Now, our agendas are totally different in that regard, so we approach it very differently. And yet, I think it's our responsibility to help nurture local scenes, new genres of music, and new artists to get them to a point where they have greater visibility, and then they can start appearing on those playlists, and then our work's kind of done. And then the algorithms and the ecosystems and so on will kind of take care of themselves. But we play a role kind of at a level before that, which is really identifying new sounds and new artists and giving them an international platform to help those artists, essentially percolate up to the top and gain greater visibility that they wouldn't in a world which is purely algorithm-based.
Exactly. Like these brand new artists that are like only playing in their hometowns. How are you going to find those people? It's up to Nick's team to be on the ground, to be meeting them, to be seeing them performing, to be seeing them DJing, to be just like on the search constantly for that music. And then using his platform, that's how they get big. That's how they are able to be on these streaming platforms in the end.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's all the time that we have, but thank you both so much. This is really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
You.